Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another Trip Hacks DC live walk. Today is Sunday, January 16th, 2022, and I am here downtown Washington, D.C., getting ready to go on a walk around some of the Martin Luther King Jr. historic sites here in D.C., and that is because today is January 16th, and tomorrow, January 17th, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so it is his holiday. If you are watching this on the replay, hello, thank you for tuning in, and go ahead and leave me a comment after you're done watching the video and let me know if you were aware of any of these locations or whether any of them are new to you. And if you are joining me here live, good morning, and go ahead and leave a chat and let me know who you are and where you're tuned in from so that I can go ahead and say hello to you too. And if you are curious, if you think it looks cold, it is cold, and that is because today is one of, if not the coldest days here in Washington, D.C. I believe that Capital Weather Gang was posting a few hours ago that overnight, or yesterday, I can't remember which, we dipped below 22 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a big deal because that is the first time in years that we have dipped down below that temperature. So if I look cold, it's because I am cold. This is very different from the live stream that I did here 2 weeks ago. If you were tuned in for that, you might remember I did not have this hat. I had my summer baseball hat. I had a light spring jacket, and that is because it was 60 degrees that day. So funny how things change so quickly. And Jay Stewart, good to see you, my friend. Afternoon where you are, over in the UK. Eddie Saunders, good to see you too, my friend. Wasn't sure if you'd be able to join Eddie, but glad that you are. And Dave Wheeler tuned in from a mild and pleasant California coast, which I do feel a bit jealous about, as it is not pleasant or mild here in Washington, D.C. today. Now, you probably saw that was the Capitol Dome in the back. That is because I am on Pennsylvania Avenue. And the first stop on the walk around Martin Luther King historic sites is right here, this big empty plaza. It's called Freedom Plaza. It was renamed in 1988. It was previously called Western Plaza. And in 1988, they did some pretty, decent improvements, although it really isn't used for a whole lot these days. If you've come to Washington, D.C. in the summer, and let me know if you have, and you might have come near here and then kind of scurried past, because in the summer, this is used primarily by angsty teenagers on skateboards who want to skate all around here and grind the rails and do all other kinds of stuff that angsty teenagers like to do. So a lot of people don't wind up seeing this because when they come here, they're like, I don't want to go over by those kids. But today, being such a cold day, no teenagers out today. There are a couple of older gentlemen on roller skates over on the other side. I saw them earlier, and one of the guys was saying, hey, we're really not supposed to be skating when it's below 32. Not sure why, but that's what he was saying. Gina T, good morning from Utah, where it is 25 degrees, approximately the same temperature as here in DC. Now, one of the cool things about Freedom Plaza is that if you don't look down, you're going to miss some cool stuff. So you might recognize this. This is a layout of the Capitol building. They have embedded this into the floor of the plaza. And there's also a White House over on the other side that I will show you. And by the way, I haven't forgotten about why this is important for Martin Luther King. Just hang tight and we'll talk about that soon. But these spots here on the ground, this is really hard to see from this level. You kind of have to have an aerial view to see what's going on here. But this is Pierre L'Enfant's design of the city, or his plan for the city. And so the reason why the Capitol is embedded on the floor right here is because this is the part of the city where the Capitol is located. So you can see that off in the distance. And then the White House, which is on the other side of the plaza, both in the floor and literally the actual White House is over in that direction, and I will be stopping over there soon, as that also has important relevance to Martin Luther King Jr. So, should be an interesting walk. Jim Teller, good morning from Chesapeake, VA. I think you might get walloped down there in Virginia by the snow later today. It is going to snow here in DC, and really the whole East Coast, all the way up from pretty far south, all the way up to the Northeast. And here in DC, they said it's going to snow, and then the temperature is going to warm, and it's going to switch over to rain. So a snow day in Washington, D.C. can be a little fun, but a rain/ice day in Washington, D.C. is never fun. All right, so we have arrived at the spot on the floor. This is the White House. So this is only one floor of the White House, and I guess appropriately, this is the floor of the White House that most visitors get to go inside when they sign up for one of those White House tours through their member of Congress. Those have not come back yet, but maybe they will eventually. And if you took one before, you might recognize the names of some of these rooms. We've got the East Room, we've got the Green Room, trying to point here, the Blue Room, probably my favorite, the Red Room, and the State Dining Room. And those are the rooms that you get to see on the typical public tour of the White House. The Blue Room's my favorite because when you look out the window, you can see the Washington Monument and you can see the Jefferson Memorial way off in the distance. So I think that is pretty cool. All right, let me continue saying my good mornings here. Helen G. from Nottingham, England. How's the weather over there in Nottingham, Helen? And Eddie's given the weather updates from North Carolina, where it's on the cusp of breaking into real rain, but been a rough morning in Raleigh. So I feel like that's what we've got to look forward to a little later today, Eddie, which is kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. There are quotes on the floor as well from many of the founding fathers, other famous people throughout history. And of course, there's those guys on the roller skates I mentioned earlier. Now, what is the relevance to Martin Luther King at this spot? Well, underneath the plaza, underneath Freedom Plaza, which was renamed in honor of Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, is a time capsule. And it was buried in 1988, and it will be reopened in 2088. So it is a 100-year time capsule. I meant to try to post a photo of it in the description of this video, since I have a really hard time doing overlays when I'm on the live, especially in the cold. But you can Google it. You can find a photo of them lowering the time capsule down under the plaza. And we already know what's in the time capsule, which I guess makes it kind of a less fun time capsule. It has one of Martin Luther King's Bibles. It has some of the robes that he wore when he was preaching, and it has some audio recordings of his speeches. I'm not sure if those are on cassette tape or 8-track or what kind of medium they put those audio recordings on, but those are down there as well. And I do kind of secretly hope that the historians, they put some things in that time capsule that they didn't tell us about, so that when the historians open it in 2088, they get to find some fun stuff that they weren't expecting. But got to wait a long time to find out about that. Megan. Oh, hi from Anne from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So Anne is posting from Megan's account today. And we went to the Lincoln Memorial yesterday. Cool. How was the Lincoln Memorial yesterday? And Christy and Jimmy from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, planning an upcoming trip to DC. I believe in the summer. Is that right? Remind me when you're coming, Christy. And Eddie Saunders has never been on the Freedom Plaza. Just another one of those things that you'll have to plan to do for your next trip there, Eddie. And if I'm going a little slow, I'm trying to keep my fingers as warm as possible in the most realistic way possible. I've got a glove on my left hand, and I've got one of those hand warmers in my right pocket so that I can alternate between scrolling the phone and warming my fingers. And Hiro from Japan, where it is 1 in the morning. Thank you for staying up late, Hiro. Or maybe you're a night owl, or you work the night shift, not sure. And Dan from Baltimore has not been to Freedom Plaza. No, has been to Freedom Plaza, but was not aware of the connection to Martin Luther King. Yeah, it's kind of a hidden connection. And it's one of those things where unless you sign up for a tour or you just happen to know about it, you're probably not going to know about it. And Helen G. says 7 degrees Celsius, I believe, in England. Not too bad. Above freezing, at least. And GM from Centerville, Maryland, originally from El Paso. Glad you're enjoying the videos. And Christy M. is coming in the heat of July. Well, July is not my favorite month weather-wise, but I suppose at least you're aware of what you're getting yourself into there, Christy. It is hot and it is humid in July. And our second stop, Martin Luther King Historic Sites, is here at the Willard Hotel. And that is because in 1963, the night before Martin Luther King delivered I Have a Dream, he stayed here at the Willard Hotel. And this is one of the hotels on the Trip Hacks DC Recommended Hotels Guide. It's an excellent location. Very convenient to just about everything, all the major tourist sites that you might want to do. So that is why it gets prime placement on my recommended guide. Now, it is not the cheapest hotel in town, and so that's why I think a lot of folks don't wind up staying there. But if you can swing it, or you're willing to splurge a little bit, give it a look for your next trip. Can't really beat the location, but a lot of famous people have stayed at the Willard. My favorite, of course, Abraham Lincoln stayed at the Willard the night before his inauguration. His first inauguration, I should say, because the president doesn't get to move into the White House until they finally take that oath of office. And so the night before, they got to stay somewhere else. If they live nearby, they might stay at home, but if they don't, they might have to stay at a hotel. Now, the Willard that Abraham Lincoln stayed in is not the one that's not the same sticks and bricks that's here right now. Very few buildings from the 1800s still stand in Washington, D.C. on their original foundation. Many of them have been rebuilt or torn down and rebuilt. And so while it's cool to say you stayed in the same hotel as both Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln, it's kind of in name only. Trish from San Jose, California. Welcome, Trish. Good to see you here. How's the weather over there in the Bay Area? My hunch is that it's probably a little warmer than here. Is a bit of a struggle to run the live stream today with very cold fingers, trying to hold the camera in my left hand and navigate the chat in my right hand, but doing my best here. All right, so we've got 2 Martin Luther King historic sites down so far. We've got Freedom Plaza, named for the 1963 speech, I Have a Dream, and we have the Willard Hotel, one of my favorites, where many, many famous people have stayed throughout history. And Trish says 48 degrees Fahrenheit at 8 a.m. Yes, thank you for waking up early, by the way. If you're tuned in from the West Coast, it's only 8 a.m. Now, on a very cold day like today, I might have considered not starting until noon, maybe not starting until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, just to possibly get a little more warmth. But with that huge storm coming in, I wanted to come out and do this and then get back inside with a hot cup of coffee before the storm starts hitting. Now, today is a very gray day here in Washington, D.C., which is actually quite typical of what you can expect if you come visit in January. I gave a tour a few weeks ago, and it was a beautiful blue sky. It was cold, but it was a decent day, and I took a lot of photos because you don't often get a nice blue sky in January. It's typically a very gray sky, like what you see here. Ooh, Megan has a good question. Do I have a favorite coffee shop in DC? I don't think I have a single favorite, but there's lots of good options. So around here, like around the White House area, there's Zeke's. That's on the other side of the White House, on the north side of the White House. And there's also Swings. There's 2 of them, and I think they actually both might be closed on Sundays. So unfortunately, downtown, right around this area, is still hurting from COVID. And so a lot of businesses, they're still struggling. We just learned of a very, very devastating COVID casualty. Cafe Mozart is closing after like 40 years. Now, that one hurts. Not gonna lie, that one hurts. So, like the coffee shops, like Swings, for example, I think they're only open Monday through Friday. Could be wrong about that, but I like them, and I like Zeke's. If you're in this area, Compass Coffee is kind of a local chain. That's a lot of people like that one. Not my personal favorite, but I would definitely go there if I was near one. And Gina T, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Oh, thank you. Coffee on me. Yes, I'm going to drink the hottest coffee. Well, maybe not the hottest coffee, but before I get it, I'm going to hold my hands around the cup and warm up my fingers. Okay, let's see. Having a hard time scrolling the chat with my cold finger here. Okay, Helen G says the gray is what we have 75% of the time. Yes, that's unfortunate because gray skies can get you down. I think that's why people struggle during January and February. It's not the cold so much as it is the gray. I don't even mind the cold that much. I like a nice brisk day. I prefer it over a hot, humid July day. But the gray can get you down. And events from Miami, Florida. Thanks for the help when visiting in the past December. Excellent. Glad you were able to make it. I know I had several folks come on tour this year from Florida. Some of them a little disappointed we didn't have a white Christmas, but kind of hard to expect to have a white Christmas. And the average Joe, hello from the DMV. Thanks for tuning in, Joe. I assume that means District, Maryland, Virginia, not the Department of Motor Vehicles. And Rob H., good to see you there, my friend. Hopefully you're at home with a hot cup of coffee. I will be getting one when I'm done. And Dave Wheeler asks what street I am on. So, not sure when you sent that chat. I was on Pennsylvania Avenue, and then I was on 15th Street, 1-5. 15th Street is also where one of the, I believe 15th is where one of the Swings locations is located. And if you turn onto New York Avenue, then Zeke's is over there. So this is the National Christmas Tree. Still cleaning up from this year's event. But there's the signage right there. They still have the sign up. And they added this new one here. Not sure if they're going to turn this into a permanent sign, but a brief history or a brief story of the National Christmas Tree. So if you've watched any of my live streams around Christmas, you already know that story. But this tree is looking a whole lot better than the previous one was. That old tree was sick and it looked really bad. So hopefully this one does better. And Bat Dog is drinking an iced coffee on a 25-degree day. I am all about the iced coffee in the summer. I know some people, they drink hot all year. Some people drink iced all year. Some people switch, and I'm a switcher. So if you drink coffee, leave me a comment or a chat because I want to know, I want to do a poll of who switches, like me, versus who drinks hot all year and who drinks iced all year. So we have arrived at the White House. Switch it over to the selfie view here. So this is as close as you can get to the White House now on the south side. So sometimes people ask how close they can get. And this is the answer right here. So if you like this, I'm going to try to do a little selfie here. If you like this selfie view, you can get this, but this is as good as you're going to get. So in the old days, you used to be able to go across to the other side of E Street and stand up against the fence. Can't do that anymore. Haven't been able to do that in many years. And if you watch old movies about DC, you might notice people driving down E Street right here. Now these people driving in these vehicles, they either work at the White House or they're Secret Service employees or something like that. But the general public does not get to drive on E Street anymore. That changed mid-90s. A lot of people think it changed in 2001. It actually changed in 1995. And you could probably guess why if you know your history. All right, Bat Dog is voting always iced, as is Megan. And Eddie Saunders is hot all year round. Interesting. Nobody switches like me. And Helen loves cold brew, but don't do a complete switch, just mix it up in the summer. Okay, that's interesting. So you might do a hot coffee in the morning and an iced coffee if you go out to a coffee shop or something. Okay, Jay Stewart, we're on the same page here. We switch summer to winter. So I usually switch over around sometime in the spring and sometime in the fall. And Rob H. is coffee in the summer and tea in the winter. That's interesting. Okay, the average Joe is also a switcher. And Dave Wheeler drinks hot green tea every day. So on a day like today, I will drink a hot tea because I want the warmth. But on a typical day, I'm coffee all the way. And if you've taken a tour with me, one of my morning tours, you probably know that, as I often bring my own, I BYOC, bring my own coffee. when I give that tour, the morning tour. Now in the summer I start at 9 a.m. It's very nice to get out early and beat some of the heavier crowds. At this time of year I started at 10 a.m. Give everyone an extra hour to sleep in. There's not heavy crowds in the winter anyway, as you can probably tell just from this live stream. And Rob H. also likes hot chocolate in the winter. Hot chocolate is a solid go-to hot beverage. Now, I was just over by the Capitol last week, and they still have, I was quite surprised to see, the Capitol Christmas tree. It still stands. Now, the lights are not on or anything like that, but the tree is still up. I figured they would have sent it to the chipper by now, because it's definitely well past its prime. And if you have a live tree, you don't want that thing sticking around too long. It becomes a fire hazard. So I'm sure that will go away soon enough, but did get one final selfie in front of it before they took it down. Haven't posted that yet, though. And Jay Stewart says, I like the idea of BYOB, bring your own beer. So the concession stands, the generic green National Park Service concession stands, believe it or not, they do sell beer. Now, the weird thing is that you're not allowed to drink alcohol in the park itself. So when you buy a beer at the concession stand, they say, okay, you have to stay at these tables, these picnic tables, right here and drink it. And I guess it depends how badly you want one. For some people, that's perfectly fine. They'll just sit there and they'll drink their beer at the picnic table or stand around. But I feel like that's one of those things a lot of people don't know about. They just assume because alcohol is not allowed in the park generally that why would the concession stand sell it? And yet they do. So I'm sure the answer can be found somewhere, but I don't happen to know it. And it is a quiet day, very quiet day here. It's a Sunday, it's a holiday weekend, and it's 25 degrees, so I don't expect to see too many people out and about today. But that's okay. These are the kind of days that can actually be preferable for going out and doing stuff, because you don't have to fend off those crowds. And if you've ever been here in the summer, you know what that means. If this were 11:30 a.m. in July, it would look a whole lot different. Now, this building straight ahead, people are so curious about that. Right over there, that's called the lockkeeper's house. I made a TikTok about that back when I used to make TikToks before I got bored of doing that. And it got a lot of attention. Even the Washington Post TikTok guy made a comment on that, which I feel like that was the highlight of my TikTok career, when the Washington Post TikTok guy commented on one of my silly little videos, and it happened to be the one about the lockkeeper's house. So that is it, straight ahead. It looks like a little house. Now, rumor is that the guy who lived there, the lockkeeper, he had a huge family, over a dozen kids, who all lived there and worked for him. I think there's a little bit of debate over exactly how many kids lived there at any one time, but it's a lot, at least according to that story. And Eddie Saunders, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Very much appreciated. Glad you were able to tune in and that you still have power. The storm hasn't taken out your power yet. And not sure if you heard that stick breaking, but I nearly tripped myself over there. One of my great fears doing these live walks, aside from the fact that the technology won't work, is that I'm going to trip and wipe out, look like a fool. And it nearly happened just there, not because of ice, but because of a huge stick. So one of the ways that I gauge how windy of a day it is or how breezy of a day it is by how the flags around the Washington Monument look. If it's a calm day, then all the flags of the Washington Monument will be down. If it's a breezy day, they'll be flying like they are right now. And if it's a windy day, they'll really be whipping. So if you've ever been up there next to the Washington Monument, you know that little spot, it's like a little wind tunnel right up there. So whenever I'm heading over for a tour, when I'm trying to figure out how windy it's going to be that day, I always look over towards the Washington Monument to figure it out that way. Looks like we've got intramural sports up ahead. Now these guys are the real troopers. Me walking around with a phone, that's nothing. These guys are the real troopers up here. We'll see what sport they're playing when I get closer. But the next Martin Luther King historic site, I'm not going up close. I'll just talk about it from back here. It's the African American History and Culture Museum. So there it is off in the distance there. And of course, they have many, many artifacts from Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, including last year or the year before, can't remember because I lose track of the years now, they acquired the original copy of the I Have a Dream speech. I believe it was owned by an individual person, and somehow or other it wound up becoming owned by a university, and then the university loaned it to the Smithsonian. So I am not a museum expert, but the way that a lot of these museums work is that the museum itself doesn't own the artifacts. The artifacts are owned by individual people or other institutions, families, and then they're loaned to the museum, in this case the Smithsonian. So there's a contract, and the contract specifies what it can be used for, how long they're allowed to have it on display for, and then once the term ends, then they have to send it back. And so that's the other answer as to what happened to all the stuff at the museum. People get concerned about that because the museum closed in 2019. And the answer is whoever owned it before just got it back. And Kara, hello, good to see you there, my friend. Good morning, thanks for tuning in. It's a cold day here in Washington, D.C. And Dave Wheeler asks, is there a reason they placed the monuments where they are? Oh, there sure is. So the short answer is that the Washington Monument, it was actually supposed to be in a right triangle. So let me walk up to this spot here and I'll show you. So you're going to have to visualize it, or you're going to have to open up Google Maps to see exactly what I'm talking about here. But behind the hill on the other side is the Capitol, and over there is the White House. And then if you drew a line from the White House to the Capitol, that would be one line, and then you draw a line from the White House over here and a line from right here over to the Capitol, and you have a right triangle. Now, the right triangle, the lines would intersect right here at this spot. That was actually the intended location for the Washington Monument, but for reasons that I won't get into in this live stream, they wound up moving it over here a little bit closer inland, because remember, this big park didn't exist in the 1800s or the 1700s. This was the Potomac River, and so they didn't want to put the Washington Monument too close to the Potomac River for probably good reasons. So if you look on a map, you'll be able to draw a right triangle, and that's where the Washington Monument went. And then from there, the location are all intentional, but each one has its own reason for being where it is. Alliston Carter, hello from Philadelphia. Good to see you there. And this is flag football, which I feel like I have not seen flag football in a long time. So if you're watching this live, leave a chat and let me know the last time you've seen anybody playing flag football. Because I definitely remember playing it as a kid. The less less violent version of regular football. But I haven't seen it in a while. Helen G, I think you're trying to use the Nightbot commands, which I have not set up. So you'll have to go on Google and type in Washington, D.C. weather. But if people like to use those Nightbot commands, I can set those up. Or maybe it worked, I don't know. And Alston Carter is moving from Nova soon. So Alston, the good news is that I now have finally some moving to DC resources. So I have a podcast episode with Coffee with Coleman, and you can listen to that now. So go on your favorite podcast app and look up Trip Hacks DC. That one was the November 1st episode, so it's been up for a few months now. So we've got lots of tips for moving to DC in that one. And then I also have published 2 out of 3 videos in the Moving to DC video series. So the information in those is actually basically the same as what's in the podcast. So there's not really anything new or novel in those. But you can watch 2 out of the 3 videos and listen to the podcast. And hopefully people find those resources helpful if they are moving to DC. It's really hard to thoroughly cover moving to DC in just a single hour because there's just so many things to consider. And so I'm not an expert on moving to DC. I would definitely subscribe to Coffee with Coleman and send him a message if you have really specific questions, because that's more his wheelhouse. I am much more knowledgeable about visiting DC. And Alston said last time I saw flag football was in 8th grade. Yeah, but probably about the same for me. And the Megan Daly, good to see you there, my friend. Glad you enjoy the videos. If you haven't seen it yet, there is a 2-part collaboration with the Megan Daly. Video, half the video on Trip Hacks DC, the other half of the video on the Megan Daly. And it is comparing and contrasting Washington, D.C. and New York, which I feel like is good content because a lot of people visit both places either on the same trip or around the same time. And Elster, yeah, definitely check out that podcast episode. I know not everybody is into podcasts. The Trip Hacks DC podcast gets a lot smaller number of listens than the videos get, but I feel like people, when you listen to podcasts, you're much more invested in them. At least I am. So let me know if you're the same or different. When I listen to podcasts, I am really invested into the whole story. So I'll often listen for the entire hour or however long it lasts. Versus with videos, if it's a 10-minute video and I'm getting bored or the sponsored ad that they packed in is, too long or annoying, I'll just click off and not watch the rest. So it's different, at least the way I treat them. Okay, now, this is the World War II Memorial, and it is a fantastic memorial, but if you come to DC and it is below 32, you're not going to get to see it with the water. And in many ways, it's really too bad because the water is what really makes the experience here. And if you've been here before and you've seen it with the water, hopefully you can appreciate that when the water's turned off. It's still very nice and everything, but I mean, just look at it. Without the water, you don't get that amazing view with the water shooting up into the air. You don't get the sights, you don't get the sounds. And so it's different. But when it gets below 32, they got to turn it off because the last thing we need is a burst pipe or damage to the memorial, and then we have years and years of construction and renovation. Now, the reflecting pool, on the other hand, they often do not drain when it's about to get below 32. So this water is looking awfully icy, and I'm no expert, but that does not look like solid ice. So do not attempt to go into the water here. It's definitely partially frozen. I think you can at least kind of see that when I get up close. Like these leaves over here, they're like frozen 2 centimeters below the surface, but you take a step onto that ice and your whole foot's going in, and that is not going to be pleasant. And the Megan Daily loves listening to podcasts on the subway. So I'm curious, Megan, if you have a special set of headphones or earphones that you use, because when I am riding the metro, I seriously struggle with listening to podcasts because the sounds of the metro, like the trains coming and going and all that, it's so loud that I really have a hard time listening to the dialogue, hearing the people speaking. So maybe I need noise canceling headphones or something like that. But I'm curious what you use. And Gina says World War I memorial in the distance there too. Yes, so this is the District of Columbia World War Memorial over there. If you've come on one of my tours, I probably took you there. I go there most of the time. Not all the time, depends on what kind of pace we're making. But that is the District of Columbia World War Memorial. It is not a national memorial, but if you rewind or go back and watch afterwards, I did pass the National World War I Memorial. Did not stop in, because it is not a Martin Luther King Jr. historic site. But that was right next to Freedom Plaza on the other side of 14th Street. So when I was walking past the Willard Hotel, it was right to the left. And maybe one day I'll go in there on a live stream and show you around, but did not stop in there today. It's brand new. It opened about a year and a half ago. It opened after there were no more remaining World War I veterans. So interesting, the timing on that one. And Eddie Saunders plugging the tourism podcast on January 1st. So thank you for that, Eddie. And I will also plug it because it was an important one for me. It was a solo episode, no guest, just talking about what 2021 was like in DC, because when I gave tours in 2021, probably the number one question, aside from all the obvious ones like about the sites, was, is tourism coming back? Which is a perfectly valid question. I think we were all desperately hoping that 2021 would be this grand return to travel and COVID would be over and everyone would be traveling again. And from my experience, the answer to that question was a definitive no. Travel and tourism is not back. But it's a complicated story. It's so complicated that I needed an entire 40-minute podcast episode to explain it. So if you want the full answer to that question and not the 30-second answer, check out the Trip Hacks DC podcast, episode number, I think, 33 or 34. It was the January 1st, 2022 episode. And Helen G agrees. I think she's agreeing about the podcast episode, hopefully. And the Megan Daily has noise-canceling Sony headphones. So I will have to go Google those when I get home. And Rob H has the same, So here I am, a podcast noob, trying to ride the metro with regular earphones. And Megan, other Megan uses iPod Pros. They're great because they block out the outside sound with noise cancellation. Okay, another option to look into. And the Megan Daily says they make me look like Princess Leia while wearing them. Love them so much. I feel like that's a pro, not a con, right? If you wore the rest of the costume, then that would look pretty cool. Of course, in New York City, if you wore a full-blown Star Wars costume on the subway, probably no one would say anything. That's one of the things I love about New York. And fiance David swears by his AirPods. So I don't have an iPhone, so I think AirPods are probably out for me. And Helen G says iPods too. Is iPods AirPods? Because the iPod, I don't even know the last time they made an iPod. Do they still make the iPod? I was actually just ruminating on the fact that many of the younger generation who comes on my tours, they have no clue that the term podcast is from combining the words iPod and broadcast. And I used to think it's because they didn't know what an iPod was, and they probably don't. And also because they don't really know what a broadcast is, because that's a very old-fashioned radio, TV type thing. So let me know if you knew the origin of the term podcast. Because I'm always fascinated when I have teenagers come on the tour and they have absolutely no idea. Makes me feel old. And Jay Stewart says DC Metro is a lot quieter than the London Underground. I can't remember the last time I was on the London Underground, probably 5-ish, 6-ish years ago. But I don't remember how loud it was, because I was probably not worried about listening to podcasts. And Alistair uses Galaxy Buds Plus. Not sure if they're noise canceling, but usually can't hear anything. Another good tip. And Kara also uses AirPods. I think AirPods are probably out for me since I don't have the iPhone, unless they work on other devices. And the Megan Daly says it came back for October, November, and December, and then vanished again. Not sure what you're referring to there. Kara says iPods do not still exist. Rob H. with the good joke here. iPods were last made when flag football was popular. Should go back and ask those guys playing flag football their opinions about iPods. So I'll date myself here. I got an iPod because when I was going to college, I purchased an Apple laptop. I think it was the PowerBook. I think that line hasn't been around for a really long time. And I bought it at an Apple store, and they said, when you buy a laptop, you get a free iPod. And it was the iPod Mini. It was one that was a very short-lived model, and it turns out that if I had kept it, I could have sold it on eBay for more than it was originally worth, because they became collector's items because they were fairly rare. So unfortunate that I lost track of that thing a long time ago, but I did use an iPod during college for years, mostly listening to music, if I recall, because podcasts were brand new back then. Definitely not popular like they are now. And, the Megan Daly was referring to tourism in New York City coming back. So I feel like December is a big tourist month in New York City, not in DC. A lot of people go to New York City for Christmas. They want to get the Christmas magic like they've seen in all the movies. That is not so much the case here. So decent reflection on the water today, despite a partially frozen reflecting pool. And we will now climb the stairs, and I will show you the next Martin Luther King historic site. And Anton will have to go back and watch the replay. Yeah, go ahead and go back whenever you want. As soon as the live stream ends, the replay is posted. And in fact, I think if you really wanted to, you could rewind the live stream and just watch it on a delay. Okay, I have to be extremely careful because for whatever reason there's still piles of snow. Don't you hate this when it's been like 2 weeks since the last snow and there's like these sad piles of dirty snow left over? That's another one of the depressing things about this time of year, seeing those sad little piles of snow. PAX DC Podcast. Glad to see we have so many podcast fans in the audience today. Okay, Eddie Saunders has the iPod Nano and bought 3 of them because kept losing them. Buy a new one, then find the old one. So I also had an iPod Nano. So fun story about that. I used to have this rubber, like this rubber watch thing that you would put on your wrist, and you could put the iPod Nano in there. And the iPod Nano had an FM radio, and I would bring that to Washington Nationals games and listen to the radio while I watched the game, and it was great. And I remember I took that thing to the game like the day after the iWatch, the Apple Watch was announced, and so many people thought that I had some kind of exclusive early version of the Apple Watch. I just had an iPod Nano in a rubber case, but it was pretty funny. All right, almost there. Now, Martin Luther King, his holiday is tomorrow in January, and that is to coincide with his birthday. The I Have a Dream speech was very much a summer event that happened in August 1963. And if you look at the floor, you can see the spot. I'll have to get really close. It's really hard to see, but they have marked the spot where he gave the speech in 1963. And when you stand here and you look out, you will recognize this from the famous photos. Now, the biggest difference is that in January, there's hardly anybody here. But in the famous photos, there are people all over the plaza and on the grass on both sides of the water as far back as the eye can see. So a very different view than what you get today. And so I highly recommend going in, Google the famous photos. If you turn around, you can see Lincoln in the background there. Not going inside today, have to press on, see all of our famous Martin Luther King Jr. historic sites. And I will be very careful going down the stairs over here. But if you do come to the Lincoln Memorial, whether it's on a tour with me or somebody else or on your own, make sure to stop and see the spot where Martin Luther King and all the other speakers, don't forget about the other speakers. People don't give the other speakers enough credit. Martin Luther King gets all the credit, but there were a lot of speakers the day of the March on Washington, and so they all gave very good speeches. But of course, I Have a Dream is the famous one, and that's the one that they marked off there. Dave Wheeler says, we had Walkmans when I was growing up. Me too. I had a Walkman, the cassette version. And I know everybody was watching Home Alone this year, and Home Alone 2. In Home Alone 2, Kevin McAllister has that Walkman style thing. I don't remember what it's called, but you could record yourself and had like a built-in microphone, and then you could play it back in slow motion. It sounded funny. And Ulster asks if I know anyone in Philadelphia to collab with. I do not, so if any of you do, let me know. I am always open to collaborations. I guess I can announce this now because it was all over social media. I just recorded several new videos with Walter's World. So those will be live on the Walter's World YouTube channel. Probably dole them out. I'm assuming he's going to dole them out over the next few months. And so that was a lot of fun. It was extremely cold this week. So it's kind of interesting when you watch the videos. There's like no one around. We recorded them over by the museums. And it's basically just us kind of pretending like we're not freezing, but at least I was freezing. My fingers were quite cold. And so very excited to see how those turn out. I think we recorded 2 videos for Walter's World, 1 video for Simply Jocelyn, and 1 video for Trip Hacks DC. So I think the Trip Hacks DC one will probably be up in February, and then the others I would expect would be up in either February or the spring. But excited for that. But let me know if you know anyone in Philadelphia, as I would enjoy going back there this summer. The only trip I personally took in 2021 was New York City, and so that is when I recorded part of the collaboration with the Megan Daily, but maybe I'll go back to New York this year. Maybe I'll try to go to Philadelphia. Those are both easy trips to make from Washington, D.C., and fun trips. So, all right, trying to warm my hands here. And Anton, sorry if I'm behind on the chats. I'm trying to warm my right hand so I can keep scrolling on the phone. Videos were helpful during a visit in September 2019. Happy to hear it. The last great year before everything came crashing down. And David asks, how is it during February? It's very similar to what you see right now, David. So the gray sky, the cold temps. I would expect February to be quite similar to this. Now, maybe not quite as cold. The coldest month of the year in DC is January, followed by February. I think followed by February or December. So what you can expect for February is gray skies, cold temperatures, small crowds. And Mark Bowling asks, is it slippery? No, fortunately, I came out before the storm was forecast to hit, so it's not wet or slippery out here, but it's going to be soon. As soon as that storm makes it up from the south, it's going to start getting slippery. And Megan says, thanks for pointing out the floor tile. We were there yesterday and did not notice that. Well, now you got to go back. It's actually very hard to notice if you aren't paying attention to the floor, which few are. Why would you be looking at the floor? And Rob H says, there's a protest scheduled next Sunday, so it might be more crowded. There's always somebody protesting something. So next Sunday might be more crowded, but who knows? And Gina T says more than 200,000 people were there per, I love this, per the internet. Yeah, so I think we don't really know exactly how many people attended the March on Washington, because it's not like there was anybody there with a clicker or there was no turnstile or anything like that, like at Disney World. It was definitely tens of thousands of people. 200,000 probably right. Now, whether there was 200,000 attending all of the events or attending I Have a Dream specifically, not sure, but you look at that photo and you can obviously tell whatever the exact number is, it was a lot of people. So Dan says, I wish they would put a simple border around that block that indicates the speech so it stands out better. That's not a bad idea, but given that it's the National Park Service and there's probably 5 different government agencies that have to approve it, it's a lot harder than it would seem. And the Megan Daly says, I am the best to collab with. Well, happy to hear that. Yes, let me know. Eddie Saunders is a fan of Walter's World. I agree, it is a fun channel, and it's very different from this. So I would say channels like Walter's World or Yellow Productions with my friend Chris Rainey, those guys are professional travelers and they have a very different perspective on travel. And and I think that's good, because if you only get travel advice from other travelers, you're going to miss things that only locals know about. And if you only get travel advice from locals, you're going to miss things that only travelers know about. And the most obvious thing to me is hotels. So travelers know way more about DC hotels than I do, because I don't stay in hotels, because I don't live here. So I could tell you about whether the location is good, whether their reputation is good, but I've never stayed in any of these places. And Kara says, getting places was strange, only did a weekend to Pittsburgh. Yeah, I only did one trip last year as well. And Helen G watched my collab with Urbanist in 2020. That's how I found you. Ah, happy to hear it. So that was a unique one for me. So the YouTube channel is called Urbanist, or Urbanist Live. I can't remember the exact name. The host is Ariel, and he does live walks like this. Now, he does them every single day, or it seems like every single day. When he was in DC, he did them every single day, some days multiple per day. And so I joined him for one of them. We walked around the Capitol, we walked over to Lincoln Park on Capitol Hill. And so that was a fun one, and he's the one who encouraged me to do these live walks. So if not for that collaboration, who knows if this would even be happening right now at all. And Daniel is watching all the vids, prepping for the trip next month. Good to hear it. So we are almost an hour in. We are exactly on time. We are about 2 minutes away from the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which is one of the stops on the Trip Hex DC Monuments Tour. And of course, because today's live stream is about Martin Luther King Jr. historic sites, it is the most obvious one. Now, the thing is, all the other sites that we've covered so far, they're actually historic sites in the sense that Martin Luther King was there, or one of his items was there, or like that time capsule was named partially for his speech. So those are all historic sites in the sense that something historic happened there. Whereas the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, it's a memorial to a historic man, right? But it's not a spot where necessarily he ever visited or did anything in particular. Now, it's very likely he visited the tidal basin and walked around at some point. And let's see, Helen G says, nice to hear. Yes, it is. And Rob H wants to know my favorite site. So definitely the I Have a Dream spot on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Because that site is one of those true, everybody always wants to know about the hidden gems. They want to know, what can I see that other people don't see? You know, and everybody goes to the Lincoln Memorial. So if you come to Washington, D.C., especially if it's your first time, you're going to the Lincoln Memorial, whether that's on a tour or whether that's just on your own. So 10 million people go to the Lincoln Memorial every year. I would bet that only a fraction of those people actually see the I Have a Dream marker. And so that's one where it's a historic site. It's right there. It's literally hidden in plain sight. I mean, people walk right over it and don't even realize they're there. So this is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, the newest memorial on the Trip Hex DC Monuments Tour. And it is it's like 10 and a half years old. Prior to this month, I used to say it was 10 years old, opened in 2011. Now I guess I have to say it's 11 years old, opened in 2011, now that we're into 2022. It is the only monument on the Trip Hex DC tour to a person who was not a former president. So if you come on the full-blown Trip Hex DC Monuments tour in the summer, we see monuments to Thomas Jefferson, Franklin Roosevelt, Abe Lincoln, George Washington, all former presidents. And then, of course, Martin Luther King, who was not a former president. He was not elected to any office. And in many ways, that shows the great respect that we have for his contributions to our country's history. That we have built this amazing statue. It's the tallest statue, in fact, on the Trip Hex DC tour. It's about 25 feet to the top of his head. And this is someone who was civil rights leader in the 1960s, not an elected official. And so the fact that we built this shows the great respect that we have for his contributions to our country's history. And I don't want to be too loud over there. I know a lot of people are enjoying the memorial for the holiday, so I will walk over here and start to say my goodbyes as we have reached our final stop here on the tour. And hopefully you enjoy this. Martin Luther King Jr. historic sites, the day before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and only hours before big winter snow ice storm hits Washington, D.C. So if you enjoyed the live walk, or you're watching this on the replay, make sure to give the video a thumbs up so that I know that you enjoyed it. And I will be back on another live walk in 2 weeks, potentially with a special guest. So stay tuned for an announcement about that, as I hope that works out. Still deciding on a location, though.
Are you taking a picture? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's see. Helen G says it was very powerful seeing it. And the Megan Daily didn't even know that this memorial existed. So I'll have to show you this one sometime when you make it to DC, Megan. This is one of the stops on the Trip Hex DC Monuments Tour. And Jay Stewart, thank you for the super chat, my friend. 2 coffees today, or 1 today and 1 tomorrow. We'll see how much coffee I can drink today. Steven says, wow, I agree. And Eddie Saunders says, looks a little busier than my last trip. So Eddie, I would say that today is holiday weekend. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is tomorrow, so I fully expected more people to be in here than on your typical winter day. But the rest of the city, pretty slow winter day. So the Megan Daily, thank you for tuning in, and Dave Wheeler as well. Thank you for tuning in from your much warmer locale on the west. And if you are a TripHacks DC insider, there is a link in the description to the extended walk. So go ahead and click on that and give me about 5 minutes to warm my hands and restart my phone, and then I will begin that. Probably won't be able to go too long today because it is quite cold, and I'm down into the 20s on battery percentage. But if you are an insider, we'll hang out for a little bit afterwards. Rob H., good to see you there, my friend. Stay warm. Jim Teller, good to see you there. And Alexander from El Salvador, good to see you there. And everyone else who's tuned in, thanks for tuning in, watching on the replay. And as I say at the end of all of these, enjoy your trip.